Good morning, everyone, or afternoon, depending where you are. Welcome to Breakfast Club. We have, as you may have seen from if you follow us on any of our social channels, today's episode is incredibly special. We are back with a perennial Breakfast Club fan favorite, our senior collections manager from Oology, Moe Flannery. Hi, Moe.
Good morning or afternoon or hello, everyone.
Yeah, I still don't have that down even after a year plus of doing this. So can you tell us in a nutshell, just to get started, why today's tour is so special?
So we're in the Ornithology and Mammalogy collection, which is special, but not that special. But within our collection, we have a very small number of really unique specimens that no one really ever gets to see. They're here for scientific purposes, for researchers to use if they have scientific questions to ask, but they're not part of our regular tour because they are so special and so important to science and important to our collection. And those are specimens of species that have gone extinct, some specimens of species that are endangered or threatened, so on the endangered species list, and then some specimens of species where the original specimen that was used to describe that new species when it was first discovered, which is a very important specimen in science, those specimens are also housed in these cases. So I probably do one in-person tour of the extinct Type-Specimen and endangered species case like once every, 5 years or so, but only to, big donors or important scientific people coming in. So this is like, I'm excited to be here and to be able to show you all this.
Yeah, and this was actually your idea. You were like, we should let, anyone who wants to see these, at least once, just because they are so, we do have to be so incredibly careful of them. And we're actually being a little careful about, we're obviously in the basement of the Academy in our scientific collections, but we're being a little bit careful about being more specific than that, just because of how rare and valuable so many of these specimens are. But I just love the fact that it was you who was like, we have to show the public deserves to see these amazing things.
Well, when else do you have this opportunity to do it virtually, and it's so much fun to be able to share things with people. And museums all over the world have their special cases of extinct and type specimen cases. Many museums have a lot more than we do. But I just think it's really nice to be able to put them out there for this brief little period of time this morning so that you can all enjoy them with me.
Yeah, I completely agree. And before we go ahead and get started with the specimens Moe has lined up to show us today, I'll just remind viewers, you are welcome. You're part of this, so you're welcome to just ask questions anytime. You can leave them in the comments if you're watching on Facebook, or in the chat box if you're watching on YouTube. Just type them in there, and I will pass them on to Moe as we go. And yeah, we welcome those. So, Alex says he went on a tour yesterday, and the collections were amazing. So that must have been one of our public floor tours. Fantastic, Alex.
Cool.
Thank you. Yeah.
Great.
All right, Moe, what's first up?
Ready?
Yeah, I think so.
Let's start with the most iconic extinct specimen in our collection. Sorry, I'm going to have to put my glasses on. Okay, so everybody has probably heard about passenger pigeons. Passenger pigeons are kind of, if you had to have a poster child for extinct species, it would probably be the passenger pigeons.
Right.
They were so numerous at one point in U.S. history that they blackened the skies for days. Huge flocks flying over people everywhere in the U.S. They were primarily in eastern North America, and they mostly went extinct due to deforestation, so changes in habitat, and hunting. Well, I'm going to put the camera down and I'm going to lift one up so that it's a little easier for you guys to see the details. And they were pretty easy to hunt because they would form these huge, let me turn this light down. They would form these huge flocks and they would all hang out together in big trees. And actually the Christmas bird count, which we nowadays do in December, usually, gosh, look at this beautiful color. Can you see that iridescent color on the back of the neck? I mean, they're beautiful birds. The Christmas bird count originally was kind of a day of go out and see how many passenger pigeons you can kill or how many birds in general you could kill. But passenger pigeons were easy to kill because they would be in these big, huge flocks. And they weren't necessarily killed for any specific purpose like food or anything like that. It was a lot of sport hunting, which is really unfortunate for this species. And we do have some eggs of passenger pigeons. I think there's about 100 passenger pigeon specimens in museums, and then a few eggs. So there's one egg.
Oh, can you go the other direction?
Oops, sorry. I was all into looking at the egg.
That seems fair.
Forgot. So let me see if I can read some of the data. This one is from Wisconsin, May 22nd, 1869.
Wow.
And it says on the back that it was in a small elm tree 20 feet from the ground. So very, very, very cool. There are people who are working on trying to de-extinct some of the extinct specimens or extinct species that we have in the U.S. And one part of their proposal is to take DNA from museum study skins and then breed or introduce passenger pigeons through a surrogate, which would be the band-tailed pigeon, which is still alive here in the U.S. And is not a threatened or endangered species. So, but there's a lot of controversy about that, and I probably didn't explain it exactly right. But
Mo, can I ask you just quickly? You referenced study skins just now. Can you kind of explain what that is for folks who may not have heard the term before?
What did I say?
Study skins.
Oh yeah, study skins. So let me show you another one while I'm explaining it. So a study skin. Focus this guy. A study skin is a specimen of a bird or mammal that has all of the internal organs removed so that they do not deteriorate. So basically you make an incision down the breast of the bird when it's a carcass, turn it inside out, take all the insides out. The legs are still here. And as you can see, the bill and the skull are still here, and the wing bones are still in there. And then you just stuff it with cotton, or if it's a big bird, a different type of packing material. And then you let them dry. Now, these birds probably have arsenic in them, which is why I'm wearing gloves to protect myself and to protect the specimens from the E2 as well. So this one is a Carolina parakeet. Believe it or not, in the U.S., we had parakeets, wild parakeets, native parakeets. This one is from Florida in 1876. Carolina parakeets went extinct in the early 1900s. The last one seen in the wild was in 1910, and the last one in captivity was in 1918. That was about the same time that the passenger pigeons went extinct. They went extinct from the wild in 1901, and the last passenger pigeon in captivity died in 1914. I believe those two birds might have been in the Chicago Zoo, I'm not sure, but they each were in captivity, the last of their species. And Carolina parakeets, it was habitat destruction. So basically humans caused most of the extinctions that we're going to talk about today. And also the pet trade, which you know is a problem for parrots and parakeets nowadays as well. Whoops, that was not. I want you to be able to see them and me, but the bird's more important than I am. And also for this species, I mean, look at how beautiful it is. Those nice red feathers on the head and the green and the yellow. So their feathers were highly sought after for decorative wear of women. So the millinery trade, women would wear hats covered in different types of bird feathers, egret feathers, parakeet feathers. So a lot of their hunting was for use in the millinery trade. Nowadays, we don't have to do that because we have plastic and other things that we can actually use to make ourselves more beautiful. But early 1900s, they didn't have that opportunity. Okay.
There's lots of people in the comments who just had no idea that we had a native parakeet. So
yeah, I know. That's the most incredible thing. And doesn't it make it more a shame that we actually don't anymore? I mean, that's the unfortunate part of it. So this is also one of the most iconic extinct species. There have been some searches recently to try and find these birds. And there were some supposed sightings of them in Arkansas in the 2004, 2008. But there's some skepticism in science whether they were actually ivory-billed woodpeckers. So we have two pair of ivory-billed woodpeckers. There's this pair, which are study skins. This is the male with his nice red feathers. And you can see he does have a date and a location. 1894 from Jefferson County, Florida. So having this date and the location is what makes a scientific specimen most important for science. So this guy has a date and a location, and then this is the female of the pair, which is from the same place, probably the same. They probably were an actual pair. So again, this one has a date and a location, which makes it scientifically valuable. These two birds were part of a research project just a few years ago when the folks studying looking in the Arkansas swamp for ivory-billed woodpeckers, when they thought they found them. They have some videotapes. You can go online probably maybe at the Cornell Lab of Ornithology and see the videos and listen to the sounds. But there's another extant, so living woodpecker, the pileated woodpecker, that is very similar to the ivory-billed woodpecker. And one would think that they're more closely related to each other because they're both in North America. But when they were looking for the birds, they did find some feathers. And so scientists wanted to test the feathers. Are these actually ivory-billed woodpeckers? How exciting would that be? So they got genetics from the two feathers. Unfortunately, they were not able to get DNA from those two feathers. But our curator, Dr. Dumbacher, and colleagues took toe pad samples from those two birds I just showed you here in our collection, and they were able to amplify DNA of those two birds. So it would have been compared to the feathers if they had been able to get genetic material from the feathers. So it didn't answer the question of whether or not the feathers that they found were ivory-billed woodpeckers, but what it did do was it allowed Jack and his colleagues to put together the family tree of ivory-billed woodpeckers. And it turns out that they're actually more closely related to the imperial woodpecker in South America. And that's not surprising because ivory-billed woodpeckers, not only were they found in kind of southeastern U.S. They're also found in Cuba too. They were found in Cuba. They're extinct from both of those places. And they went extinct in, the last one was seen in 1944 in Louisiana, and actually 1987 in Cuba. So they went extinct in Cuba much later than that. All right, let me show you the other two ivory-billed, just since we're talking about them. These are two of our iconic ivory-billed woodpeckers that kind of give you an idea of, a little dark, of what they look like in life. A little more than a study skin on a tray. So here they are perched in lifelike positions, great for display. Oops, sorry about that, folks. Let's see if I can focus in on them a little bit more. But not as important to science, because unfortunately when people mount specimens, they don't usually like to have a tag hanging off of them with data. And so data are often lost when a bird is mounted for display. But the cool thing about mounted birds is they have eyes, which study skins don't have eyes.
Right.
So while we're here, why don't we look at this magic mystery box here? So this came to us from Stanford University. So at some point in history, 1960s or 70s, Stanford decided to no longer house their natural history collection. And so the bird and mammal collection was donated here to the Academy. I would have everybody guess what they think this might be. Kind of looks like a penguin, right? Well, the scientific name is Pinguinus, but it is actually a great auk. So they're not actually related to penguins. They're more closely related to birds that you might see around here on the Farallones or dead on the beach, common murres. Those are auks that are still alive, still extant. And up in Alaska, there's another auk that I'm forgetting the name of, and there's a razor-bill that is also an auk species that's on the East Coast. So great auks were more closely related to razor-bills, the extant auk on the East Coast. They were found on northern Atlantic coast, so like up in, Finland and really cold areas. But this is not actually a specimen of one bird. It's a composite. So great auk skeletons are not easy to come by, but what they do find is researchers find bones in kitchen middens. So when native people had to dispose of their waste, they would put them all together into a midden or like a kitchen garbage hump or pit and then bury it over. So you can find great auk bones in these kitchen middens, and then you can put together a mounted specimen. So it's called a composite specimen because it's made of bones from different great auk carcasses. You can kind of see some of them even look different than each other, but I wouldn't try to figure out which one is which.
We had a good, I'm just recognizing the people who guessed dodo, because we had a handful of those, and that's a pretty good guess, but also a shout out to Valeria who sent in a great auk in all caps almost immediately. So
nice. And I am sorry to say we do not have a dodo in our collection. There are very few dodo specimens in museums. We have a fake model of a dodo in the Naturalist Center. So if you ever come to the Academy on site, you can see our model dodo. It's kind of funny. He's got like one arm or one wing sticking out, like doing the high five thing.
That sounds like selfie material.
Yeah, exactly. I believe there's one at the British Museum. I think I saw one when I was there. Either a mounted bird or a skeleton. I can't remember exactly. But yeah, unfortunately, they did not persist as specimens. All right, let's go back.
Okay.
Maybe we can shift gears to a different type of important specimen. Let me close up this guy. Get him out of the way. Any questions?
Well, so Deanna asked, this is something that you mentioned at the top of the program, but for folks who joined later, can you clarify, were all of the kind of the birds that you've shown, were they hunted for food or just for sport, or what contributed to their extinction or being endangered?
It depends on the species, and there are some different reasons that birds were hunted. Like the passenger pigeons were more for sport and some for food. Carolina parakeets were for the millinery trade. I'm trying to think. Some were like with clear cutting and habitat destruction, but then some are hunting just for humans, like for, yeah, we talked about it for sport, but some were hunted for collections, but not museum collections necessarily, although hopefully they made their way into museum collections. But in the early 1900s, before the Migratory Bird Treaty Act, which came into effect in, I believe, 1918, a lot of people had personal collections of birds, and there were explorers that went all over the world collecting either for themselves or they were paid by very rich people to go out and collect specimens for them. Alfred Russel Wallace is a really famous explorer who went out and collected a lot of animals for collections, which was important at the time because we didn't have binoculars. So people couldn't go out and study birds with binoculars and identify them. The only way that you could really get a good look at an animal was to hunt it and to have it in your hand. And those collections, some of them did make their way into museums eventually. But there were a couple species where those private collectors really should have been a little more careful about what they were collecting.
Yeah. It's interesting that the Migratory Bird Act came into play so early, like 1918. I didn't, like, obviously there was already clear evidence that there was a problem.
Right, because Endangered Species Act is much later in the 70s. But yeah, they recognized that there was a problem. Sorry, I just ducked down to pull out some, I'll do one more extinct bird, and while we're talking about extinction, because this one is an interesting story. So this one is an Oo. I believe that's how you say it. It's an extinct Hawaiian bird. And you can see it's mostly, this was actually a mount at one point, which is why it has an eye, which also means that it doesn't have great data, right? Because the data was disassociated from the mount. But these were endemic on Hawaii, the island of Hawaii. And they were, there's a really interesting story about them, is that these beautiful yellow feathers, if you've ever seen Hawaiian nobility capes, the nobles in Hawaii wore these amazing capes made with feathers from Hawaiian birds. Now, one would think, oh no, that's how they went extinct. That is not actually how they went extinct. The native Hawaiians would capture the birds and only take a few of the feathers that they needed to make these capes. So they didn't actually kill them for the Hawaiian capes. It was only Europeans, when they came in to Hawaii, that actually caused most of the problem. And they hunted them for the personal collections that I was talking about, and then also for the pet trade. But unfortunately, some species just don't do well as pets. And this was one particular species. So they tried to raise them as pets, and they would live for like a couple of days in captivity. So, I mean, people learn things the hard way, but And that's a brutal way to learn things. All right, let's go on to a couple others. These, like a lighting and camera affair today. Are those upside down for you or right side up?
No, that's great.
Okay. So these are Bachman's warblers. We have lots of warblers in the U.S. They're amazing on the East Coast. We have a few here on the West Coast. But as a birder, it's not as much fun to go out looking for warblers here on the West Coast because there's only a handful of species on the East Coast during migration. Oh my God, it's the best time of the world. Best time of the year to be out looking at warblers up in the trees and stuff. But Bachman's warblers are actually an extinct warbler here in the U.S. They were a southern species from the southern Atlantic coast across the plains and into Mississippi and Kentucky. And they went extinct in the 1940s with maybe a possible sighting in the 1960s. But they went extinct mostly because of habitat destruction. So they weren't really hunted. You know, they're a tiny bird. They weren't hunted for any real purposes, but they lost a lot of habitat. And that's also a problem when humans come in and they change the habitat, and then there's no habitat for the birds. Condors have that issue, and big mammals like grizzly bears have that issue. But then also they drain swamps, and the Bachman's warblers really needed the swamp. So this is my fave. These are my favorites. I know, I can't help it. These are like the most exciting specimens in the collection. Turn the light off. These are Guadalupe storm petrels. They have this amazing smell. I wish I could share it with you. It kind of smells like an old musty suitcase, like your grandmother's, actually like your grandmother's great-grandmother's hat box that you might find up in the attic with a real musty, attic-y smell. Storm petrels in general have that smell because they nest underground. But these are the two most important specimens in our collection. So they are from the island of Guadalupe. That's where, off of Mexico, that's where Guadalupe storm petrels were found. You can see they have a red tag on them. That red tag indicates that it's the Type-Specimen. So I mentioned types at the beginning. There are different kinds of Type-Specimens, but in general, a Type-Specimen, a holotype, is the original specimen that the species was described based on. So the scientists found this bird. It was different from everything else they'd seen. They decided it's a new species. Nowadays we do genetics. And they have to use individual specimens as like the ultimate example of this species. So these two are the Type-Specimen. I'm not sure if they're the holotype or paratype, or there's a bunch of different kinds. Like if you lose a type, then you have a different kind of type that takes its place and has a different name. And a paratype is another bird that was found at the same time in the same location from the original. It's all kind of confusing, but taxonomists are really good at that. Okay, so it's the type. They're the type. Guadalupe storm petrels have not been seen on the island of Guadalupe probably since the 1930s, so they're assumed to be extinct, although they haven't been, I don't think it's actually been stated that they're gone. There have been researchers that have gone out looking for them and have not been able to find them, like at the time of year when they should find them breeding there. But these two birds are the only two specimens in the bird and mammal collection that survived the 1906 fire that devastated the Academy after the 1906 earthquake. So the Academy was housed in Market Street at that point in time. And who knows the story? Like, it's kind of a mystery of exactly how these two birds came to. Probably Rebecca in the library knows the story, and we should have her here. But I believe that, well, I know the botanists were going through the building as things were burning and were gathering as many specimens as they could. We don't know what we had in the birds and mammals collection prior to the '06 earthquake, maybe like 25,000 specimens, but of course the ledger books all burned in the fire too. And, you know, you can just imagine the story that like a researcher, one of the curators probably was working on this species and had them on his desk or had them near his desk or somewhere close, accessible. And the botanist collected them, and they actually got some manuscript that he was working on too, because there is a letter, I believe, in the archives that says, you know, we were able to rescue your book and a couple of specimens. So I think that's the story of these guys, but there's not a lot of detail.
Yeah, I did a virtual tour with our entomology collections manager last week, and he showed some type specimens that were also rescued from the fire. And I agree, we should check with our head librarian, Rebecca Kim, that he said that Alice Eastwood just after she got a bunch of botany specimens, and then she just hit the type cases, you know, for whoever that she could. So I wonder if maybe her pockets were just like bulging with, yeah,
maybe she actually went into the type specimens, and so she knew,
right,
and you know, nowadays I don't know what we would do, because I don't know where everybody else's type specimens are, and there's a lot more of them now. But I do have some empty boxes in this room, so if there's a fire, I'm coming at this case for sure, because you would not want those to not survive.
No.
Okay, let's talk about a couple of birds that are still living, because that's more, and these are fun. Here, light, camera.
Wow.
So this one, he kind of looks like I don't know if it's a good position or not. So this is a kiwi. So these are found off of New Zealand. They're a endangered species. So we've shifted from things that no longer exist to things that hopefully we can change our ways and make sure they continue to exist. There are efforts to protect them. And in 2017, 2 of their species were actually downlisted from endangered to vulnerable. So there are groups that are working on kiwis, but you can tell they're kind of, they have a life history strategy that does not make existence easy, right? They are flightless. They're kind of, I don't want to say dorky, but, you know, they're not,
it's very scientific.
They're not going to escape quickly. And one of their main threats is introduced mammalian predators, things like goats and cats and dogs and weasels and different things that humans have introduced, and habitat destruction too. And when animals live on island habitats or island areas, they often have a more difficult existence. But they're really, and their feathers are almost like fur. It's kind of amazing.
Really amazing. Yeah.
Yeah, they're cute.
Oh, Mo, we just got an update from our one of our community science directors, Rebecca Johnson, who adds that Alice Eastwood actually advocated to house type specimens separately from the rest of collections way before the fire, which is why she was able to find them so easily.
Oh, cool.
It's amazing. Yeah.
Yeah, that is totally amazing. Good. I'm glad to hear that those birds weren't like out on somebody's desk. That would have been a bad way to keep things back then. Sorry, you just got like a big butt shot of me.
Yeah, I had you on full screen too. Wow, this is outrageous. I have never seen this.
This one is okay. So the mouth is not completely appropriate. I suggest if anyone really wants to learn more about these amazing birds, David Attenborough did a great series on them. They're called cockapos, and they don't actually stand in a chicken-like stance. So this mount is not great. But these are from New Zealand. They're now currently found on 4 islands off of New Zealand, and there's a really intensive recovery program for them as well. Again, a big flightless bird who has kind of an interesting life history strategy that makes it even harder for them to survive. So these guys, they have a lekking mating process, right? So they, let me turn the light down so he's not blown out. The males will kind of get together and have to do their displays. They have big areas that are their territories. And the females kind of choose from the males which one is the best male to mate with. However, they actually only breed when this certain plant is flowering. I think it's called the Rimu, R-I-M-U plant. And it only flowers like every 2 to 5 years.
It's a bad
strategy. And then they
strategy.
only have a few young, you know, like 2 or 3. Sometimes they have a clutch of 4. And their incubation period is really long. When they sit on the eggs, they sit on the eggs for a long time. And then the chicks take forever to grow, like 3 months to grow. And even the young birds, when they fledge, they stick around with their parents for a while. So as far as being susceptible to predators, they have really got it rough, very hard for them. But the recovery program has had some success. They've put them on these islands where they've removed the introduced predators, which was their main issue. And they're doing better. I think there might be 127 or so in the recovery program, and they've done some experimenting with supplemental food. They also have this cool strategy where, depending on the food supply, the females can regulate the sex of the chicks. I don't understand exactly how it works, but if the food supply is really good, then they'll tend to have more female young,
right? Because
the females disperse and build nests, and if the food supply is not good, they'll tend to have, I don't know, it's really cool.
Except, do you know, Mo, we had a question. Do you know what the relationship between the kakapo and the flower is?
Well, when they did the supplemental feeding from the flowers, they didn't find any real, like it didn't help in the chick's growth or anything like that. So I don't know specifically. Some researchers that are working closely with them might have some idea. I've never actually read like if they found a specific nutrient or something that's in the flower.
Yeah, but that's a good question.
All right. We're going to look at this top shelf here. Let's see if we can do this. We'll do it with the camera.
We have a debate about the spelling. Is it K-A-K-A-P-O?
Yes.
Okay.
K-A-K-A-P-O, also known as the owl parrot, which is a little easier to remember because it kind of looks like an owl and a parrot mix. So here are 2 really cool skulls. We're shifting to mammals now. The one on your left, I think. No, you're right as you're looking at your screen. This one, the big one, is a California grizzly skull. So California grizzlies went extinct in California, which is where they were found in the early 1900s. The last one was in the wild in 1922. We actually have the last captive grizzly in our collection, Monarch. He's kind of iconic. He was the model for the California flag. We did a night school that focused on Monarch and California grizzlies, so you guys can probably find that recording there. Rebecca and I did that one. And then this is a Caribbean monk seal, also an extinct species. They were found in the Caribbean. They're related to the Hawaiian monk seals. And they were overhunted for oil from their blubber. And then also they went extinct because of overfishing of their food supply. Right. So a little bit of a different story there. And then we have some really cool mammals here, little tiny ones. These are fun. I don't know if Jack's done talk. He has probably done a talk about these, but our curator, Dr. Dumbacher, helped describe the new species of this animal here, which is an elephant shrew. So not actually related to shrews, actually more closely related to elephants than they are to shrews. They're a species found in Africa. These are mostly from Namibia. And he and one of our research associates, Galen Rathbun, who spent his life studying these wonderful little nocturnal creatures in Africa, saw that this one species in this one area looked really pink compared to the other ones. And so they captured a few of them and did the genetics and compared them. So this is the newest type series of specimens that we have in our collection. So they were just described as new species within the last decade. Let me see when they were caught.
Yeah. Like 4 or 5 years, maybe?
Oh my God, I can't find the date on this tag. It has so much information. 2010 was when these were collected.
Oh, 20, okay.
The ones next to them are also elephant shrews. They're a new subspecies. So these are the type specimens of that subspecies. And then this guy is related to elephant shrews. This is a giant sengi. And let me put the camera down because I'm going to pick him up so you can get the full view, and then I'm going to pick up something else after that. Not wiggly wobbly everywhere. Okay. Back to the elephant shrew. So it's pretty big.
Yeah.
And it's surprising that a new species was identified this one was caught in 2006. So within the last 10 to 15 years, a large animal like this was discovered as a new species. But it's not that surprising because they really do only come out at night, and they're not all over the place. You know, they're not like in people's houses and things, so they're not that common for people to see. And they're also from Africa.
And when was that? I thought I remembered a paper coming out, a new species paper in the last like 4 or 5 years or something. Was that the larger
that
one?
was probably the meekest, the little pink one that I showed you earlier. This also was the work of Galen Rathbun, and they were this one was from March 2006. So the paper probably usually takes researchers a couple of years to get all the work done to figure out a new species. So it probably came out 2008 or 2010 or something like that.
And Mo, do you know, Deanna asked whether any of these shrews are endangered. Do you know their status?
No, I don't think they are endangered.
Okay.
I might be wrong about that, but I don't think they are. Okay.
Wow.
Here's my hand, and here's this egg. So this is a complete, should I lift it out of the box? Yeah.
I wish you had help.
Mostly I'm just terrified.
Yeah, same. Wow.
But it's totally intact. Has the catalog number on it. I don't know if you can hear that. Can you hear it? You can hear it. So that's like the dried up yolk rolling around inside. We actually x-rayed the egg at one point, and we were surprised to find a paper clip in there. No, I had left the tag in the box when we x-rayed.
Well, whose egg is this again? I think we missed it.
Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't even tell you. It's an elephant bird egg. Wow. So elephant birds were these huge ratites that lived in Madagascar probably up until the 1600s. There's some question about that, whether they went extinct like at 1000 or 12,000 AD, or if they actually lived longer. But they had these huge eggs that they would bury in mounds. They didn't sit on the eggs, and then the eggs would hatch into new elephant birds. So it's not that surprising to find a whole egg. And it's not that surprising that the egg didn't hatch and doesn't have anything inside except for a blob. But I did read that there is one elephant bird egg in a collection somewhere that actually has like a embryo inside. I was hoping we had an embryo inside, but
instead of
we don't.
Well,
not a paperclip either.
How thick are the egg's walls in an egg that size?
That one, I mean, we'd have to like, there's got to be some way to measure it without, oh, actually, do we have, yeah, here we go. Back to the camera. Oh, sorry. You can see in here we have fossilized pieces of, oops, you can't see because I'm not in the right place, of elephant bird egg. There's the whole one in the background. Let's see if I can focus. Why scientists should not be in charge of technology.
No, you're awesome. For the audience that doesn't know, we actually benefit from Moe's theater background. That's why she's like so conscious of the camera. It's fantastic.
Well, I can't tell if you can see, but there's how thick that egg is.
Yeah, this is great.
Yeah, so these are pieces of elephant bird eggs. They actually are like rocks because they're fossilized. But that's, that's substantial compared to other birds' eggs as far as thickness. These are from near Tulare, Madagascar. That's from Ed Ross, who was probably working there. Let's see.
How much, Nathaniel would like to know if you could kind of describe how much larger they were than an ostrich.
Oh gosh, we had a display here a couple of years ago. I think they were like 10 feet tall, either 10 or 16. That's what's coming to my mind. But they were big. They were huge animals. And I had heard that there was actually an eagle on Madagascar that was big enough that it would feed on their eggs, and that it was a threat to elephant birds. But mostly they went extinct because of human activity, like hunting, but also disease too. They ended up getting some kind of diseases, or I don't know exactly what it was, but because humans came in to play. That's it for this case. We have one more special, I mean, there's other things. There's Galapagos fur seal type specimens, and there's a pelt of a grizzly bear, and there's a bunch of other type specimens that are not as famous.
You sound so jaded, Moe.
No.
We have this marvel and that marvel.
You just won't see. I can't show you them all, and I don't know all the stories. Those were the highlights. We have some common species that are. Let me just show you some common species. So the types. These are the type specimens of a junco, which you might see in your yard. But a specific subspecies of junco from Monterey County. These are the types. So they have little red tags. So two of them, the two with the full-on red tags are the holotypes. And then the rest of them, I believe, are called paratypes that were found from the same location as the original two. Mm-hmm. Oh, these were collected on the 4th of July, 1892.
Oh, wow.
That's kind of cool.
Yeah. Snapshot of someone's holiday.
Those were just some.
And Angela asked, could you remind us where the elephant bird egg was found?
Madagascar. I may not have actually said that.
No, I think you did, but.
All right. Should we talk about condors and their distribution and their wing size, or?
Sure. You want that slide now?
That would be great.
Here you go.
Then I'm going to have to move myself so you won't actually see me if you can turn me off.
Oh, sure.
You won't see.
Well, I have to, hang on, Mo. I have to actually like leave you on in order to hear you. So let me remove the slide. So what we're doing right now is we're moving locations, but we aren't able to show, we're being careful about security, just not showing you where Mo is.
Can you still cover my camera?
Yeah, hang on one second. I'll just put up an overlay actually, but that way we can still hear you. Okay, go ahead now.
So we don't have, so you won't get to see the condor wings, but I'll show you one in real life, and that'll be better than seeing the wing size. So condors are a species here in California that is on the endangered species list. There currently are about 400 condors. If you want to learn more about a great recovery program, you can read all about the condor recovery and the amount of work that scientists who work with condors have done over the years to keep this species from going extinct. So they got down to about 23, I believe, small number of birds still left in the wild alive. That was in the 70s or 80s. And then the recovery program started, and what they did is they brought all of the condors from the wild into captivity for a captive rearing program, because otherwise they were going to disappear from the earth. And now they, all right, you can turn me back on.
Okay.
Now
do you want me to put the wings up now, Mel?
Oh, you could, yeah.
Okay.
Now there are 400 condors free flying, or 400 condors, not all in the wild. So if you look at this map, the yellow in California area is where I think there are about 160 condors free flying now that have been released, and the red stars are the release sites. So once they've been raised from chicks and grown up to adults, they release them at those release sites. There are 20 of them in Baja at that release site down there. So they release them in areas where the habitat is going to support the condors. And then in Arizona, Utah, Nevada, there's about 80 of them that are released out there. So that's 300 that are released, and there's probably about 100 that are still in the captive rearing program being raised. But it is a successful story, although they are still having issues. So one of the main habitat destruction is a big one for condors, because they need a big space with a food supply. And one of the issues is lead poisoning, and that is still persists today. And that's when hunters use lead shots when they hunt. Usually they gut their carcasses out in the wild, and they leave the guts, which are that's great, because the condors need food. And so the guts provide food for the condors. But what's not great about it is if they're using lead shot, you know, a shotgun is got hundreds of little tiny pellets. And if they're made out of lead, then the guts are sprinkled with lead pellets. The condors ingest the lead, and then they get lead poisoning, just like you or I would get lead poisoning if we ate a lot of lead, or kids get lead poisoning from chewing on lead paint. And I think almost every condor that is in the program has had medical treatment for lead poisoning at one point in their life. So they are still coming into rehab for lead poisoning. Some of them are still dying from lead poisoning. And we're actually really lucky, because the California Department of Fish and Wildlife just recently archived a bunch of recent condors that had died, that were found dead, that then they necropsied to investigate why they died as part of this lead poisoning study. And the remains from those condors all came to us here at the Academy. So even though it's an endangered species, we are still able to continue to build our collection of of this important animal. Most of the ones I'm going to show you now are from the 1800s, though. So this, I don't know if I'm going to use the camera just yet. I don't know how much I can even use the camera over here.
Right. Oh, wow.
This is a condor wing. Their wingspan, they're the largest bird in North America.
Wow, that's amazing.
I know, it is amazing. Their wingspan can be 9.5 feet. I've even heard 13 feet, but I don't know if I'm remembering that correctly.
Wow.
Yeah, just incredible. This was a bird that was in captivity in the 70s, I believe.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, 96. So some of them were raised in private aviaries, and that's where this one came from.
And how, good question from reviewers, how is that preserved?
The wing is similar to a study skin. You have to do a little bit more work on a big wing like this. So they would have very strong wing muscles right through the center along their humerus, radius, and ulna. And so we have to make an incision and pull all of the muscle out from there. And because this one is so recent, it is not preserved with arsenic. Mm-hmm. So we have to be very conscious of pests. And in our room, where the collection room is built to protect all these specimens, because we want to make sure that everything that we have in our collection is here 100 years from now, 500 years from now, because we don't know what kind of technology will be developed that scientists could learn something from. I mean, right now, someone could take feathers from this condor or from any of the historic condors. That might actually be a more important study, not just because that one was in captivity. But they could take feathers and you could do stable isotope analysis, which would tell you where the animal was living and what trophic level it was feeding on during that growth of that feather. And that's what these guys are important for. You can also get genetics from their feet. I guess I could do a close-up of the feet. That would be very cool. You want to see their feet?
There we go.
There you go. I mean, let me put my hand in for comparison. That is a big bird.
Yep. Wow.
I mean, so we can take skin samples, toe pad samples, if a researcher has the appropriate laboratory and funding and has a proven method, they can get genetics from the skin of toe pads. So this one is from near San Diego, California in 1895. So this is a whole study skin of a California condor. And what you're missing out virtually is there is a slight odor to this case. Not terrible, but then again, I work on dead whales, so my sense of smell is probably not the most accurate. It's kind of a little bit of a sour smell, sour decay type smell, but it's primarily because these guys are scavengers, and so that's why they have the naked heads, so they can like really dig into a disgusting carcass and not get their feathers all messed up on their heads. So there is still a little bit of the scavenger feeding bird smell in this case. And then one other cool condor bit just to close us out. Camera. This is a condor egg. Right, eggs and nests are also an important part of ornithology collections. So it's a pretty big egg. I don't know how many they have in a clutch. I'm trying to think from like condor cams that I've used at, maybe one or two. I'm not sure how many babies, which probably has something to do with the fact that they have so much trouble in the wild. This one is from 1922 from Ventura County, California. So one like fun tidbit about eggs. So a lot of egg collections were built back in the early 1900s when it was a hobby for young people, mostly young boys, to go out and watch birds and watch them building a nest and then watch them laying eggs and then collecting the eggs. And then they would trade them back and forth with each other like baseball cards or Pokemon cards or whatever kids trade nowadays. And they would also sell them. So egg collectors had amazing books that they would have little receipts from different people. It's very cool. But in the egg catalog, we have an egg catalog from 1902. And so this is before the Migratory Bird Treaty Act and the Endangered Species Act and everything. And in that egg catalog, like a robin egg, just your typical American robin, was like 15 cents or something. So nowadays that might be about $5. A condor egg back in 1902 cost $374.
Wow.
So, I mean, it was a lot of money for a condor egg. That would be multiple thousands of dollars now. Now, it's not that we're buying eggs. No one can legally buy or sell eggs. But
also, can you tell us the name of the word for the study of eggs? Because it's one of my favorite words.
Oology. I don't know if that's how you say it. Oology.
Yeah.
We were debating earlier the name of the Hawaiian bird, the oo, and I was calling it the oo. So now we're closing with oology.
Yeah. I wondered if you also would tell us, you mentioned something to me about the story of the feather thief, which might explain a bit about why we're so careful.
Yeah. There's a great book out, and there's some good podcasts that talk about the situation that happened. And I saw the author of the book give a presentation to a bunch of museum professionals. But there was a horrible heist, robbery of museum specimens, irreplaceable, amazing historic specimens from the British Museum. Not anyone other than the thief himself. It was not the fault of anyone in the museum, but we're all a lot more careful about security now because the person who stole them to take them all apart and sell the feathers for the fly fishing hobbyists. And it breaks my heart every time I think about it. And I would be completely devastated, as I'm sure the collections managers were at the British Museum when they discovered it. And amazing specimens that were collected by, Alfred Russel Wallace, who he and Darwin both came up with the theory of natural selection around the same time. And Wallace should get more credit, but he doesn't get a lot of credit. And those collections just can never be replaced. And it's heart-wrenching and it's sickening because it really was a theft. And it was a theft of something that's not replaceable and has amazing scientific value because, we can go back and look at what animals were eating and where they were when those birds were collected. And that's what makes scientific research specimens so important.
Yeah.
So we're very cautious, especially about extinct and endangered specimens because they are irreplaceable and they're so important to science. But there are other, they did not, the feather thief, I don't think any of the birds were extinct, but they were some rare species that you can't really get a hold of nowadays easily. And
yeah, and like the same way that like everything we can learn now from like DNA and isotopes, that people who collected these things back then would never have dreamed we could learn. Like who knows what we could have, or you know, will, but also from those specimens could have learned in the future too, which is yeah. Which is also such a cool part of your job, and that you're and why you're so careful about it, because they have all this intrinsic value now, but that will only grow as time passes and get better and better. Yeah.
Exactly. It's my responsibility to make sure that everything in here is here for those researchers to do what they need to do.
Yeah.
And researchers nowadays come from all over the world for different studies, and so that's like a librarian of life.
Yeah, exactly. Well, this was really and truly amazing. I haven't seen most of EZ4 either, even having been at the Academy for years and years. So it was thank you so much for taking us back there. And we do still have some questions from folks about earlier specimens. But okay, because we're past the hour mark now. So are you okay? So Mira, go ahead and ask your questions about previous specimens. We had a question about condors, and two actually. The first question was, are all condors related? So for example, would the California condors be related to the Amazon condors?
So they are genetically related on the family tree, the California condors and the Andean condors. Not close, but when you first asked that, I was thinking like, are they all related to each other? Because the population got down to 23 individuals.
Right.
So that's called a bottleneck, and that does cause some loss of genetic diversity in populations. And that's part of what the recovery program does, is they keep a stud book. I don't have one here, but we're opening a new exhibit. I think it's next year sometime, maybe next summer. And it's a collections focused exhibit. And on display in that exhibit will be a different condor wing that actually has a number on it. I believe it's number 99. So if you're out at Pinnacles National Monument or anywhere you might see condors, you might see one flying with a number on its wing, a visible number that you can see through binoculars. And that's how scientists keep track of them. And that's how, like, where they are in the wild, but also as part of the stud book, and then the decisions that they make on, you know, who mates with whom to keep the genetic diversity in the population as high as they possibly can. So they're all kind of related to each other in California. And yes, they are on the tree of life related to the Andean condors.
Okay, great. And then Deanna asked whether condor eggs have problems with pesticides, as we've heard.
So condors were one of the species that have now benefited from the discontinued use of DDT in the U.S. There are still one of the threats that they do face today is still some residual pesticides thinning the eggs, but it's not as bad as it was like in the 70s. And that happened with peregrine falcons. And that's another situation where museum specimens were really integral in helping to solve a conservation problem. So a lot of birds were not able to reproduce and were endangered, peregrine falcon in particular, because their eggs were breaking when they were sitting on them, which is, you know, that's not going to be a conducive way to get to a viable chick. And researchers looked at the eggs that were being broken, and then they looked in museum collections and measured the thickness of the eggs, and it correlated to when DDT started to be used in the US. And so eggshells started to thin with the use of that pesticide. And so when DDT was banned in the US, you now see the peregrine falcon population really making a tremendous recovery after that. And it was not specimens in our collection, but museum specimens, about 17,000 peregrine falcon eggs that researchers looked at in museum collections for that project. And so condors have experienced some of that more in the past and just a little bit now.
Yeah, I love those stories of like immediate real world impact from collections.
Exactly.
So Mira had a question about, you mentioned Caribbean and Hawaiian monk seals, and she has a evolution question. Specifically, she wants to know if the Caribbean and Hawaiian monk seals diverged after the land bridge between the Americas formed or some other way.
I do not know because I don't know enough about that particular species, but she could be right. That is something I would have to look up. But yeah, they were a more related species, and then they diverged into two different species. So it could definitely have been the land bridge.
Yeah,
but I don't know for sure.
Yeah, you're allowed. I mean, when I think about the number of species that you care for, I'm always amazed when you have like knowledge about 90% of them.
Well, I would not say that, but we do a lot of marine mammal work, so I am closely involved with marine mammals, mostly the ones that we have here in the Bay Area. So, and I've seen Hawaiian monk seals. The only Caribbean monk seal I've seen is that skull. So I just haven't spent that much time learning about them, but yeah.
Maybe we should add here too that if you're interested in marine mammals, you should keep an eye on our social channels, because Moe and team may have some really interesting classes to announce pretty soon for that are free for everyone. Okay,
definitely will.
Yep. Okay, let me take this one last one. And just lots of people saying thank you and how much they enjoyed today. But this last question from a YouTube viewer who just wants you to know a little bit more about the name of the DNA analysis you mentioned when talking about condors that allows you to see the trophic level at which they feed.
Oh, so that actually is a stable isotope analysis. So that's looking at, in feathers, you can get carbon and nitrogen isotope signals. It's from many animal parts. So from birds, it's primarily from feathers. And then from marine mammals, you can get stable isotopes from baleen in baleen whales. So the baleen plates, which is keratin, so basically like our hair, and they can actually get stable isotopes from your hair too as well, and your fingernails. And from baleen, we can see where baleen whales have been feeding in the trophic level from teeth. So sperm whale teeth, you can open up a sperm whale tooth. You can count the layers, so you can age the animal. And then you can actually drill the dentin and cementum from the layers. And that tells you by the stable isotopes what the animal was feeding on at that point in time, and where they were. Because they look at also the ocean isotope signals compared to the carbon and nitrogen isotope signals in the teeth. And another really cool stable isotope study that happened with specimens and extinct specimens in this collection is there's a researcher, and she was on our grizzly bear nightlife. So she watched the night school recording of the grizzly bear night school. I'm forgetting her name. I think it was Alexis. She took tiny bone samples from our grizzly bear skulls, and she was looking at stable isotopes of what the grizzly bears were feeding on. And she also radiocarbon dated those specimens. And then there was another researcher her hypothesis was that coyotes have a current diet that is more marine based, because there's no grizzly bears feeding on dead marine mammals on the beaches. So the coyotes can now exploit that resource because the grizzly bears are no longer feeding on marine mammals. So I think that was two separate studies, and she was looking at the stable isotopes of the grizzly bears to try and find the marine mammal signal, and then looking at stable isotopes and diet, stomach contents and stuff from modern day coyotes. So
that's
really
incredible.
Cool. Yeah.
Yeah.
And, you know, we're very particular about letting people take tiny pieces of bone from an extinct animal. But when the study is that important, and they have the appropriate lab and the skills, and it gets published, then it's totally worth it.
Yeah, that's such an amazing level of detail from that's such a cool story.
Yeah.
Thank you again, and thank you to everyone watching. If you have more questions for Moe, you can keep leaving them, and we'll try to answer the ones that we can. But also, we're going to try a short experiment where, because we're scheduling breakfast clubs less regularly, we're doing about 2 a month. If you would like to be notified of when upcoming breakfast clubs happen, I'm going to drop an email address in the comments now. You're welcome to send your email address to this one, and we will let you know when they're scheduled. And again, we probably within 2 weeks, we'll be able to share out some more information about this really amazing trio of classes that Moe and her team will be offering specific to marine mammals and how to ID them. So stay tuned for that. And Moe, this was so cool. Thank you. You really delivered on the best ever collections to our promise.
I know, no pressure, but they really are the best specimens to show. And I'm honored to be able to work with them and to be able to share them with all of you today. So thank you for being here.
Yeah, we're honored you took time to do it. Thank you so much. And we will see you again soon. Thank you. Yep. Bye, everyone.